last time we started off like this. Since then, we've had several requests for explanations or recreations of the patches involved, and we ended up like this. The patch isn't exactly congruent with the finished product. It's more of a zone of possibilities, a plane of composition. It's neither a starting point nor an end point, it's a continuing point, a ray, a vector, motion, the connecting tissue between past and future. I didn't have time to really act on the original goal of recreating a shared system patch based on the recording and the verbal description of the patch. Listening back to my shared system recordings under discussion, I think the piece that I will be most successful in recreating will be the one unwittingly named by Tony as "Nothing Matters but in the best way possible."
And I'm happily traveling through an alternate timeline where nothing matters, but in the best way possible.
For this patch, unlike some of the others, the core idea has been documented because I could find evidence of myself talking to Tony about it. Here's what I said. I had one piece on there where it's basically just a repeating sequence.
Yeah.
Recorded into the morphogene, and then I layered it back at either an octave down or an octave up.
Oh, cool.
And then just had it modulating while I was doing that, and it was, so it kind of like creates a little additional melodies around that same sequence that are in tune with them.
Yeah.
And it was very, like, that's basically all that one piece was
Nice.
just each time that it wrapped back around, it would hit record again at the end of that sequence. And
that's great.
And so let's take that morphogene idea to be the conceptual core of the patch, but I can also tell when listening to the recording that the patch involves a specific melodic fragment. And as I think about it, I can remember that was actually where the patch began. I had this bit of melody in my head, and I programmed it into Renee for use in the patch. This is usually the sort of process that I'm more likely to undertake using a more traditional instrument, a piano or a keyboard, for example. But I know that the melody continued to lodge in my memory after recording it, and it loomed large in Tony's experience of it as well.
That's the one, it's just this really simple melody that kind of like climbs upwards and then tumbles back down, and it just keeps doing that and just keeps repeating that. There's subtle changes beneath it.
The melody was right?
That's it.
With Renee, I tend to gravitate toward generating melodies through the interaction of shapes and modulations rather than transcribing existing ones from outside. But this melody is fairly straightforward and shouldn't be too hard to remake. When listening, I can hear that it's made of two 16-step sequences. Each sequence plays twice before switching back to the other one. So I'm thinking a ×4 clock to clock the sequence and a divide by 8 clock to switch between them. This will mean 32 steps total of each sequence as it goes. And just see what we get here. I think it should be something along those lines. And Now, in the original, I also heard a little delay and reverb, certainly coming from Echophone and Morphogene. Okay, that sounds like the first sequence correct. And I think that if I set the function page to trigger, since these are all gliding, that will hold my gate open the whole time. Now, let's hear the other. The other sequence is going to be it's going to be higher pitched, and we'll use the same set of notes. That doesn't sound right. Okay, I think that should be right. Let's see. I don't think the strike input has quite enough decay to it here, so I'm going to trigger a math channel with it instead. Okay, so we have two sequences now. And they're not reset at the same time, so I'm going to just switch. Okay, so yeah, I have both sequences there, one on X and one on Y. And now the question is of switching between them so that one runs and the other stops. And I think if I take a divide by 16. Okay, I'm having trouble making it work. I'm sure I could make it work if I kept working at it, but I'm going to take a different approach. Instead, what I'm going to do is use that gate to Zmod, turn on I'm going to use just two states here, and I'm going to go ahead and impaste the same thing to the other state. Now, I think what I'll try and do is just turn off all the gates on the Y channel on one state, and then turn off all the gates on the X channel on the other state. Now let's switch between them in here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and store what I have so far. Okay, I think I finally have both sequences alternating correctly. Let's go ahead and bring the morphogene into it. So I believe that I used all the basic settings to start with. Morph at 1:1, gene size at full, slide all the way at the beginning, and I went one octave down from the original start, and then we used the same clock to switch between the sequences that we would also use to enable record. No, that can't be right. It must be half that clock rate. So let's try a divide by 16 clock to the record input and just see where that gets us. maybe it was actually half the speed instead of twice, or half the rate instead of, let's try divide by 4. And then we would have had another gate that occasionally shifted this from 1 octave down on the replay to 1 octave up. So let's try, say, divide by 6 for that. That doesn't sound, I think that was more timed with the original, so let's try this, divide by 16 instead. My guess is that when I created this patch in the first place, I probably did a lot of fine adjustment of the phase relationships of these different things that changed the sequences, started the recording, and did the octave shifting so that they all sounded perfectly interlocked in the end. But I still think we're getting pretty close to what the original was here. I also wonder if I might have actually run the Echophone and Reverb prior to the morphogene so that some of that was being layered in instead of it coming after. Hard to say. I'm starting to think that maybe it's time for a shared system patch sheet, maybe even one with a little musical staff underneath. At the same time, maybe getting recreations just right and exact doesn't quite matter, but in the best way possible. Thinking about this piece again reminded me of this octave up and down morphogene layering concept, and I'd like to explore it in the future with different material at the input. In general, I often find that while I usually don't come back to specific patches over and over again, little bits and pieces of them remain in my memory and make their way into future pieces in many different ways and combinations. These tendrils can often make their way into the future from patches that don't otherwise go anywhere, so to speak. Hopefully you got something out of this exercise too. Thanks for watching, and happy patching.